My aim is today to present a bit what's happening in Brussels, basically from the policy lens, and to give you a bit of an overview how policy is actually shaping the technical architecture in the EU. So we'll be talking about charge for change and how to navigate the evolving regulatory landscape today, particularly focusing on smart and bidirectional charging and plug and charge. By now, I think everyone who works in the eMobility field or has any connection with the eMobility field knows what AFIR is. I think this needs no introduction. It's the overarching framework from a regulatory point of view, and as some people call it in the eMobility field, the Bible of eMobility, because it sets basically three main objectives. It sets out to accelerate the deployment of charging infrastructure, to ensure interoperability and payment optionality. It's been in force since April last year, and we are actually planning a review of AFIR for 2026. So a lot of things that have been working properly, but also a lot of things that maybe need to be driven further. The European Commission recently published the Delegated and Implementing Acts to AFIR. Four of them touching on technical specification, on standards, additional data types, and common technical requirements for interfaces. The one that is particularly relevant for us today is the Delegated Act on Standards, because it touches upon the ISO 15118 standard. I know this is a topic that has raised a lot of debates in the industry. So let me just give you an overview what it entails. Basically, it says that Dash 2 is mandated immediately, so 6 months after the Delegated Act already entered into force, that is January 2026, for all newly installed or renovated publicly accessible recharging points. For Dash 20, the Commission is saying that this will be applicable for publicly recharging points that are installed or renovated from 1st of January 2027. But for interoperability purposes, both Dash 2 and 20 will continue to coexist, actually, to ensure the full market transition. This is actually the goal. And also maybe a point that not all of us in the industry are aware of is that Dash 20 is actually also mandated for private recharging points that are renovated and built from 1st of January 2027. And obviously, one point of interest is also that whereas the scope of the regulation does not entail or touch upon OEMs, they're also encouraged to consider these standards when they're releasing new EV vehicles, and when possible to update from Dash 2 to Dash 20. I'll be touching upon that a bit later from a regulatory point of view, but these are basically the features that are entailed in the ISO 15118 standard. So it touches upon smart charging, wireless charging, plug and charge, and secure communication. And I'll start with a bit of an overview of smart and bidirectional charging, without boring you to death and going into detail through each and every article. This is basically the overview, starting with AFIR, but everything that relates to smart and bidirectional charging is also entailed in EPBD. So this is touching upon private, so residential and commercial buildings, and RED 3, the Renewable Energy Directive. And all of them basically are very consistent. They say that the private and public recharging points should support smart charging, but when possible also deploy V2G. Because the EPBD, so the Energy Performance Buildings Directive, and the Renewable Energy Directive, they're not immediately applicable into national law. They need further guidance, because what a directive does, it provides a bit of flexibility for member states to actually transpose them into national legislation. So for actually to ensure that the transposition is done in a uniform way, the Commission has actually brought forward guidance for member states. Guidance means that basically it's a non-binding law. It's just meant for member states to be provided with guidance for interpretation and implementation implementation of the provisions. So here in the ePBD implementation that was released in June, it was a very busy summer, I can tell you, in Brussels. We see cases where bidirectional recharging are most relevant, right? Where the private benefits exceed costs, where we have large recharging infrastructure, where we have high renewable energy potential. Grid congestion is a very, very important topic on the EU agenda, and also need for grid stability. We also have guidance that was released also during the summer on the Article 20 of RED 3, because this touches upon sharing battery data. And this is a point that member states actually have been a bit struggling with in implementation. So the Commission actually put forward guidance regarding technical specifications. So just to be a bit more specific what this includes, it includes sharing state of charge, state of health, location, battery capacity, power set point, and the manufacturers are supposed to provide this in real time and free of cost to users, owners, and authorized third parties. So what the guidance does, it actually outlines the technical parameters for the data points for sharing, and not going too much into the technical details, but there are 3 use cases that the Commission has identified. Basically, when the vehicle is moving, when the vehicle is actually parked and plugged in, and when the vehicle is parked but not plugged in. And how do we have the necessary interfaces? Basically, the Commission says this can be done over the air or through recharging cables and wireless. But at the same time, the Commission acknowledges this is not a perfect solution, right? There is a need for further standardization, and probably we'll see more debates and more, guidance, or even possibly an in-vehicle data act very soon in Brussels. So what are other strategic initiatives in Brussels? We had the Automotive Action Plan released. It was actually done at a very speedy pace for the Commission, published on 5th of March, after the Commission had just taken up basically officially the mandate beginning of the year. And what does it entail on smart and bidirectional charging? Basically, the member states are encouraged to put together a conducive framework for smart and bidirectional charging. We're looking at V2G regulatory sandboxes. The Commission is taking into consideration to create a special regime or the regulatory framework for a very limited time, maybe 4 to 5 years, and for a limited scope. They're looking at fleets or a very limited, let's say, category of passengers. They're looking at exchanges best practices between member states. I think one of the discussions was around best practices from the Netherlands and from France during the last discussion with the Commission. And also they're assessing the needs for smart and bidirectional charging readiness for EVs in type approval. What does this mean? We heard from the Commission actually that the Commission with the coordination of DG Grow is considering to do the type approval vehicle review, which would entail a possible ISO 15118-20 mandate on the OEM side, right? Because we already have a mandate in place for the charging infrastructure, but for things to be able to work, we need a similar mandate on the OEM side. But things are moving very slowly on that front. So until now, we didn't see any specific proposals, but we are being reassured or told that by end of the year, we'll probably see a very specific proposal in this regard as well. And again, the in-vehicle data, the first version of the Automotive Action Plan actually had a very clear language saying we'll have a legislative proposal. But actually, the final version that we had was there will be guidance around the Data Act and possibly, if needed now, a legislative proposal. So we're all looking forward to see if this will materialize or not. On the Sustainable Transport Forum, so this is also one, probably, how many of you are actually familiar with the Sustainable Transport Forum? Please raise your hand. So not many of us. So what the Sustainable Transport Forum subgroup actually does, it's a group of experts that have been, especially the one on government standards and data, that have been assigned by the Commission the task to actually work further on AFIR, EPBD and RED 3 to further refine the definition of smart charging, because when we talk about smart charging, I think all of us probably have a different understanding. There is not one definition of smart charging. charging. So we're further working on this, part of a small drafting team, but also part of a larger working group that provides feedback from various industry stakeholders. We're working on roles and responsibilities. We're working on data needs, use cases, and this report will actually constitute the basis for the EU Commission's work on smart charging and bidirectional charging, and will probably shape future regulation because we have a FIR review that is planned for 2026, and all the recommendations that will be entailed in this report will also be reflected possibly in legislation. Our deliverable is actually to finalize this report by end of the year. It's been a deadline that has been postponed. Why? Because we have different work streams under the Commission, as the Commission likes to do. They are starting, a work stream under DG Move and one under DG Ener and one under DG Grow. So we were supposed to finalize this report a long time ago. But we were told that actually the Commission has set up different working group working on flexibility and smart and bidirectional charging, data for energy, the D4E, that is under DG Ener, and we are now supposed to actually coordinate our work. So whatever we are now doing at the level of the SDF has to be done in a coordinated way with data for energy, but also the Coalition of the Willing. Probably being in Germany, I would presume a lot of you know what this initiative is. Maybe raise your hands. How many are familiar with the Coalition of the Willing? Okay, so the Coalition of the Willing is an initiative that was brought forward by the German government, but it's not only a German initiative. It actually tries to include stakeholders from industry, but also policy level. So a lot of governmental stakeholders are part of this conversation as well from various countries. And they have released their report, several reports actually last year, and they're working on a new report that will be released probably sometime end of October or November. And as we see, there are so many working groups and so many initiatives. Now we have also Task 53 that is also working on the same topic. So the idea is to bring everyone at the table and actually coordinate on roles and responsibilities. When we're talking about flexibility from a mobility point of view, it's actually a different type of flexibility than data for energy is understanding. So we have to align on roles and responsibilities. We have to align on data. These are the main challenges that we have identified. At the current moment, we're dealing with data fragmentations. There's no unified, secure data sharing ecosystem. There are interoperability gaps, so more standardization that is critical to harmonize interfaces. There are obviously regulatory changes, so we need use cases to be defined and, again, roles and responsibilities. So our recommendation is to operationalize data frameworks to strengthen these standards and protocol and to clarify market roles and use cases. One point that is actually missing here because it's not within the scope of industry and it's something that should be dealt with maybe at the level of member states or maybe in a very articulated, coordinated way at the EU level is also how to incentivize actually end consumers to use those services, right? Because we in our EV bubble, we're talking about flexibility and we're talking about, smart bidirectional charging, but a lot of consumers actually are not even aware or not even interested to know. So we have to educate also a bit more the public and raise awareness with the customers actually what that entails and what that would mean. For plug and charge, we have very specific provisions on plug and charge. So basically, first of all, to clarify, this is not mandatory, right? What the AFIR delegated acts are saying is you have to predispose your software and your hardware to be able to support bidirectional charging and deploy services as bidirectional charging or plug and charge, but operators can voluntarily decide if they offer it, for the moment voluntarily either with Dash 2 and Dash 20. But the idea is that if you do offer it, so basically you have to, starting with 1st of January 2027, comply with both Dash 2 and Dash 20. And also very important to say, this touches upon AC, DC, light duty, heavy duty vehicles that, so charging points that are installed or renovated. What happens with other existing solutions? The Commission also is very clear. So they are allowed to exist, obviously, but the idea is to transition to fully market transition to -20. So this, I get this question a lot. So when will this happen? I don't have an answer for you, unfortunately. I think there are a lot of issues also with -20 and a lot of things to be clarified. A lot of stakeholders also find, the -20 implementation deadline a bit too ambitious for 1st of January 2027. So there are a lot of discussions to be held on these topics, but I think the direction is very clear. I think the direction from the policy side, at least, is clearly stating plug and charge is the solution of the future. And what are we also doing in terms of further advancing this topic? So the European Commission is trying to establish and operate a public key infrastructure that is essential to establish a future communication and security for alternative fuels. We already did significant preparatory work. There was already a report, and I can send you the link to whoever is interested to these recommendations from industry experts. It was initially done at the level of the subgroup for governance and standards. And then the Commission put forward actually a more in-depth study on how the governance framework could be further developed. And now we also have a new subgroup that has been established also at the level of the STF. It's also an expert group that is working on PKI ecosystem management. To be set up in 2024, obviously it will be probably pushed back in terms of deadline, but again, we have resumed actually very recently the conversation within this group to actually set up and operate a unified EU PKI ecosystem for eMobility, and the idea is to have one single EU certificate trust list. And to actually enable interoperability of different PKI ecosystem, because I think this is one pain point in the industry. How is this supposed to work? We at Hubject, probably if you've been watching a bit our announcements, also at the EVS, are already ahead of the game and not really waiting for regulation or for a very clear direction from the Commission, because things are stalling. So we are already working with a lot of industry stakeholders to drive interoperability between different PKI ecosystems. Probably you've seen the announcement with GIREF and IDETO at the EVS. So the market is already moving forward and moving a bit faster than regulation does. So also, obviously, being in the policy field, I'm all for having regulation, but the right regulation and the right dose of regulation in place, because I think market is definitely ahead with innovation. So that's where regulation actually has to keep up. Thank you so much. If there's any questions from your side, happy to provide answers or more clarity, or if you want to have a more engaging dialogue between us, you're also happy to welcome you on stage so we have a more engaging session. Any questions from the audience? Yes, I think we need a mic here. Thank you so much. Oh, and I need a headset. I'm not hearing because I don't have a headset. Yeah. Thank you. No. I think it's on. The microphone is on, so you.
I hope so.
Yes.
So, hi, good morning. It was not part of your presentation, but I'm wondering a little bit on ad hoc payments and the traction in ad hoc payments. Do you have any view on the traction there in terms of implementation of terminals, percentages of transactions, and how this is viewed from the regulator's perspective, and whether this is potentially also coming up for review in the next half year?
I don't have any percentages per se, but I think the Commission is definitely monitoring very closely how the deployment is going, because AFIR, one of the points that AFIR is saying is that you have to have optionality in terms of payments. And I think we've seen significant progress there, but also there are definitely some hiccups along the EV journey, and there's room for improvement. That being said, I think that won't be one key point of the AFIR review, because this is supposed to be targeted on very specific points. So it won't be a revision, but the idea is to have a review. And I think the main points that the Commission is looking at in the review is mainly enhancing price transparency. And the other point that is also seen vital for our sector is heavy-duty vehicles. So these are the 2 points that the Commission already outlined for the review, but I don't think that ad hoc payments will be a central point.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Mark Sonntag from E.ON, CPO side. You already mentioned that a part of the review of AFIR will be price transparency. Can you say a little bit more about that, specifically Article 5, Paragraph 3? Currently, the rule regarding price discrimination is heavily uncertain, I may say, and is a burden for the industry as such, because there's a lot of regulatory unclarity.
Yes, we've had extensive discussions with the Commission, also within the framework of the STF meetings as well, or on the sides of the discussions. And basically, the Commission is also looking at analyzing the situation and having a very intense dialogue with industry stakeholders. So they're talking to CPOs, they're talking to e-mobility providers, they're talking to roaming platforms to kind of try to assess the situation for the moment. They have 3 options to have very clear provisions on pricing, which they don't want to, because obviously it's also keeping a very vivid and healthy competition, right? Then it's maybe having language around how to strengthen price transparency, because we already have provisions, but maybe not enough. So I think we'll probably see some enforcement around that, maybe possibly also some provisions on the EMP side, because I think that's a bit what is kind of lacking on AFIR at the moment. I think it's very much CPO focused, and maybe the EMP on the transparency side could be enhanced. And third option would be not to do anything and just leave things as they are. So I think at this moment the Commission is just in the assessment phase and just trying to assess if there are any distorting market practices at the moment. And I think that's also for the member states to be looking more carefully at. I know for a fact that in Germany and in France the authorities are actually looking if there's any distortion in the market. But if that's not the case, we also want healthy competition, right? So I think that's also like a prerequisite that regulation is not too invasive and not too prescriptive. I think we have a question there.
Yes, my name is Adriana Fricke. I have a bit of similar question. AFIR says that this year all CPOs have to share data. And next year we do this via the national access points. From my point of view, this is very clearly written. And it's a regulation, so it's now
should be implemented. Exactly.
It should be implemented
yes.
This year, that every CPO shares data. But only in some member states we have some initiative where we have at least national business-driven platform. No, not the access points. Yeah. But we have a business-driven OCPI platform where every CPO shares their OCPI data. So in some member states it's working, but mostly we do not see this data in Europe. But it's inside the regulation. So where is the data? And why do the member states not say, okay, dear CPO, you know what you have to do this year. Next year, okay, we make this DataX2 stuff and so on and so on. But these are 2 separate things. And we should not mix them, because in Germany it's always a bit, yes, we could perhaps wait a little bit and next year we make this DATEX 2. But really, DATEX 2 does not help us for business. It's nice that they are doing their DATEX 2 stuff, but from a business side, we need much more data, much more real-time data, and not this governmental approach to data sharing.
Thank you for your question, and I think this is a very valid point. I have to say this is definitely a point where regulation is highly criticized from the perspective that it lacks a bit teeth, right, from the enforcement side, because we don't really have enforcement provisions in AFIR. It's all left a bit at the level of the member states to monitor how that goes. If the European Commission starts an infringement procedure, it's also a very lengthy procedure, a very complicated procedure. So I think that's one of the points why regulation is sometimes not taken very seriously. We are lagging behind in the implementation of this particular point, and some member states have made progress, and some member states are still to catch up on this. And on the DATEX 2, I know for a fact that a lot of industry stakeholders have raised this as a critical point, because they actually say, why not OCPI and not DATEX 2? Let's use a format that is a bit more easier to implement for data. And I think on the access point, again, we have the delegated act on additional data types, and I think the Commission tried to bring more clarity on the point. But I think an ongoing discussion, also in view of the AFIR review, is, do we actually need national access points? Let's just have one European access point where everyone can feed in, the data, and then we don't have separate initiatives. Again, we end up with a very a system that lacks uniformity. Basically, again, we are creating complexity and challenges for the industry.